everybody. Thanks for joining season 1, episode 1 of the J5 self-defense and fitness shows on podcasts and YouTube. I'm super excited to get these launched and going. And I'm really excited because my co-host today is my brother and compatriot in self-defense slash self-preservation, Matt Maruster. And Matt has a vast experience in the world of especially in the Second Amendment area and firearms. And we're going to just talk a little bit about the expectations. There's a bazillion podcasts and YouTube channels out there that want to talk about self-defense and in your field, Matt, to do with, firearms training and what to carry, what not to carry and things like that. So I wanted to make something just a little bit different. What I'd like to do is, the way I look at it is everybody's life is a story, and we have the opportunity to become part of somebody else's story, and they have an opportunity to become part of ours. So what the goal of this is this isn't speaking to people that necessarily are, highly efficient in the world of self-defense or highly efficient in the world of firearms. It's going to be more for your average person that goes out to work 9 to 5 and is striving to try to incorporate some fitness, some self-defense, and maybe some firearm training, some firearm knowledge, into their lives. And as you meet people, you connect, you make networks, and most of those times those connections are positive interactions. We work in the realm of what happens when that's a negative interaction, right? So I like to talk about self-defense as in self-preservation more, meaning, we can train a behavior in our lives that helps us preserve our lives rather than defending our lives. What I mean by that is, like, for example, de-escalation of situations. So we don't have to get into a defense situation. But something that I always like to talk about is the fact that, you can be the best skilled marksman, you can be the highest martial artist, you can be a UFC fighter, but there's things that attack us in our lives, things that come after us that we don't necessarily think about defending against. We just came through a pandemic where we're still working our way through it, where, suicide rate is up, astronomical numbers, bullying in schools is really high. So there's a lot of things that can attack us: anxiety, depression, addictions. So the goal of some of these podcasts is to have people on that have experienced that in their life. How did they manage to come through that? How did they manage to get through to the other side and defend their lives, defend their families' lives? Addictions, anxieties, they don't only, affect one person, they affect the entire family unit and beyond. So, I want to incorporate some of that. I want to incorporate some, product reviews. I want to use some of your knowledge, for the average person that might be considering picking up a firearm for the first time. I know you do an outstanding job on your CCW classes, and we're gonna talk about that stuff a lot. But what do you do when there's a million things to look at and to think about? And I wish, when I first picked up a firearm, I wish I had the resource, because I think I've spent, $1,000 on holsters that I never needed.
Sure.
Things in that world I never needed, and just to point people in that right direction. So again, I will thank you, man, for co-hosting with me. I'm excited about it. We'll also do some live trainings where we can, practice. We're going to talk about specifically today, there's two fields, right? There's unarmed self-defense or preservation. There's armed. And in my experience of, mixed martial arts and the field that I work in security with about 45 years worth of experience, often you'll hear two realms, right? Well, I got a gun, I don't need it, or I don't want to carry a gun, I'm a black belt, that
Sure.
kind of that theory. And is there an arena for both of those to merge? Something that I've been doing for the past few years is using mixed martial arts, not just for self-defense, but for fitness, right? Fitness is a huge portion in your life, and we're going to talk about that probably in future episodes, about what happens physiologically to the body when you come under an attack or an assault or a perceived threat. And I know you do that in your classes. So I'm excited to have you, man. We're going to do this, right? And hopefully this will create a network and will be something of value to some people out there, right? So I'm going to introduce you, but I know that you should never say you were a former Marine. Right? A Marine is a
Yeah,
Marine.
yeah.
So,
Right.
so I was thinking, how do you word that? Can I say non-practicing Marine?
Yeah, I'm a Marine.
Okay, Jay's a
Marine at
Marine. My
heart,
boy's a
right?
Marine.
Right.
So how many years did you spend enlisted?
9 years.
9 years. And you saw
Yeah.
active combat, right?
Yep. Yeah. I was in the infantry. I got to go out to California, which was cool. I'm from Ohio, but like ended up out in California and Pendleton, and that was good. It was something that I re-enlisted to go over to Iraq right when all that was happening, and so God put me in a place to get some life experiences that would help later on that I didn't realize at the time, but now looking back, gave me some experience that I can kind of impart and just kind of a different outlook on life, and then I met my wife. She was in the Navy. We got married, and we're out in California, and she didn't want me deploying overseas anymore. So I convinced her to let me be a cop out there. So I'd be home, every night. I wouldn't be on deployment or in the field, but I ended up working like nights the entire time I was an officer out there. So
Yeah.
kind of backfired. But again, got to work a good area that was busy, and a lot of good experience dealing with use of force and criminality, criminal mind, and things like that. And but kind of like we were out there, didn't have any family, had a kid, had our daughter, and wanted to move back home to Ohio to be around family. And just along the way, God just placed me in exactly where He wants me, and I can't. Now I'm here with you, and
Right.
it's cool just to see how you're talking about everybody's story and how you feed in. We don't even realize how we impact other people until later on, and it's just cool to be a part of, this and your story and everything. And yeah, it's awesome. We're close by, so we'll get together and do some training and stuff. So I'm excited.
Maybe we'll head out to the range and shoot some videos and do some cool stuff out there. So
Yep.
That'll be awesome. No, I appreciate it. And obviously for everybody listening, I'm sure they appreciate your service too and everything you've done. So I'm excited. Also, you left out, the fame of concealedcarry.com. You also co-host and produce for those guys, right?
Yeah, I produce the Concealed Carry podcast, and we're up over 500 episodes. We've been chugging along, and so we cover a lot of Second Amendment, like you said, Second Amendment stuff, self-defense type things, mostly armed mindset, and we have guests come on and we do legal stuff, legal updates and things like that. And I'm an editor, a writer and editor for the website. So a lot of the training or the different articles you might find on the site, I write it and edit a lot on those. So it keeps me busy. I don't really have a job, so it keeps me busy.
Well, you have a job. You have a child. So
yes.
You have a full-time job there. No, that's awesome. So you have a wealth of information, not only what I would call book information, right? But you lived it, you've experienced it. So we talked about together in the past about why we would want to do something together like this. And I think, we're both at the age where I know I'm tired of being thrown on the floor every night and getting punched, right? Although I'm still doing it on some personal training levels. But I would like to be able to, pour out any information, any experience, any knowledge I might have that, might be useful. You're always going to have people that, they got it all together. All right. But again, I know when I first started out, there was a lot of things I just wish I had known ahead of time. Saved a lot of time. And, we live in a strange time. Things are definitely a lot more violent, I think. You always hear every generation say, well, it's getting worse. But I think, the threat of violence is definitely out there. And that's, from bullying all the way up to having to defend yourself with a firearm. So I kind of would like to use my last few years of experience of teaching one-on-one with people and listening to parents and listening to kids and listening to adults. I've trained everybody from 6 years old up to into the mid 70s.
Yeah.
So, I want to be able to kind of incorporate our knowledge together and hopefully produce something good. So, let's just start. I'm gonna work on the armed section, right? Because
Sure.
like I said, there's always people that are armed and unarmed, and they don't ever want the two streams to ever cross.
Right.
But in some of the drills, I mean, we just did a drill recently, and in some of the drills I've done before, when it comes to, you're armed. Does that necessarily mean you're going to be able to get that weapon out in time? Are you going to be able to defend that weapon if somebody's onto you? Can you pull that gun out and just start shooting in the air or giving warning shots, as we're hearing a lot about of today, right? Or just shoot him in the leg. There's a lot of nonsense out there, right? So let's say I'm just the average Joe. Maybe I'm considering for the first time, because of the environment, I'm considering, man, I think I want to start perhaps looking at getting a firearm, right?
Sure. Yeah.
To defend myself and my family if need be. So what would be their first steps? Would it be taking a CCW class, or is there something before that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, and so you're spot on, because right now, and people always ask me like, hey, I bet you're busy right now with everything that's going on, and people anxiety's up. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately I am. I mean, like, it's not that I don't want to teach classes, but I'd much like, my busyness is directly related to people's anxieties about violence in the country. And I'd rather be out of business if we could, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, but the reality is that we do, there is violence, and it's become, people are realizing it a little bit more. Maybe they're exposed to it, whether it's through news or social media or whatnot. And so they're realizing the reality of violence, and because you train self-defense, you understand violence, but a lot of people don't. And so when they see it, it's that guttural feeling that says, man, I don't want to be like that. What can I do? And so a lot of people say, well, I went out and bought a gun and I've been shooting, and now I want to get my concealed carry license. If you haven't bought a gun yet and you're thinking about it, and it's something you want to do, I would recommend, I mean, if you want to go through the concealed carry class, that's a basic class. And it depending on who's teaching it and stuff, there's a little different curriculum, but at least from where I'm concerned is, it's a basic class that gives you the basic foundational things you need, more mindset wise than actually pulling the trigger. We absolutely do training with the handgun, but there's so much more that goes into it. And so I recommend people, if they don't have a gun, to first come out to the class and say, hey, I don't have a gun. Can I rent one? Can you, I bring out guns and let people shoot different size guns and because what ends up happening is they go to a gun store, they're jazzed up to get a gun. They go in there, and especially now there's only a few guns available. So they're selling you whatever they have. Yeah. And so they're like, this is the best one for you. And it isn't, right? And so, or it may be, but it might not be. And then they invest this money in there, and they come to the class, and I'm like, they either realize it through actually using the gun, or they ask an honest question like, hey, is this a good gun? I'm like, honestly, there are better guns out there, right? Like reliability wise or whatever it might be. And so but I would say first make the decision, hey, this is what I want to do, because the gun isn't the thing that's going to make you safe, right? Your mind is got to be engaged. And then how do you use the gun if it's necessary? Or how do you use unarmed self-defense if that's the right way, right? But the gun itself isn't like this magical shield. So first go to a class so you can start understanding what self-defense with the firearm looks like. And then you get the tools that most fit you and your lifestyle, and how you can utilize it. So that'd kind of be my sequence.
Yeah. That's great. That's good information, because like I said, I think I spent a small fortune on holsters and probably some guns in the beginning, because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And you can spend money pretty fast, especially today,
Yeah.
and ammunition being really limited, you know, if you get the wrong size gun or whatever, that's a lot of money out the door. So, I want to kind of progress. So back up CCW for those that might be listening or watching that may not know what that means. So it's obviously concealed carry, right? So it's the ability or the right to carry a firearm concealed.
Right.
So what would that involve if in CCW in short, quick terms? I mean, I sign up for your class. What am I expecting?
Yeah. So in Ohio, you might hear the term CHL, concealed handgun license. Ohio, it only applies to handguns. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to attend a class. They're 8 hours worth of training. Two of the hours is range time. You're going to go through basic handling procedures of the firearm, safety rules, of course, how to, at least in my course, it's we focus on site acquisition through, whether it's flash site picture or a point shooting type thing, all the way to, marksmanship using your sights, well aimed precision shooting. We kind of, I focus on the high probability concealed carry or personal defense interactions with firearms. So, from 0 feet to the bad guy to around 15 feet. So that's, I have 2 hours to work with people, and that's the 90% or 80% of interactions or encounters like that. So I focus that because that's high probability. And not that the other stuff isn't important. It's just when I have that much time, I focus on the high. And so you'll attend the class. We talk about mindset, avoidance. There's a big component is the legal aspect of it. Where can you carry? Where can you not carry? There's two different aspects of the law. There's gun law. It's like, where can you carry this and where can you not? And, that type of law. And then there's self-defense law that is, deals with the use of force. And those are two different things. And so sometimes, you read the statutes and you're like, okay, I can carry here. I know the gun laws. And it's like, if you don't understand what a justifiable, legally justifiable use of force is and what the elements are of that, you could end up in hot water. And
I think, for those listening, CCW classes aren't all created equal, right? And I know I have a favorable bias to you. But,
thank you.
You're welcome. But when I took my CCW class, I got to tell you, it was probably 15 years ago. I think coming up to 15 years. Not very informative. Basically, it seemed to me like just going through ABC just to check it off the box. 2 hours on the range because that was your minimum. Didn't really care if you hit too much in the way of the target or not. I know I know I hit the dirt a few times with some rounds. So there was no site acquisition or anything like that. So I appreciate that you are actually stepping up and giving much more than is required, right? You could just be checking off boxes, taking their check and sending them down the road.
Right.
So I appreciate that. And so, we're going to make sure everybody can have access to your information at the end of this at some point. But I would highly recommend, really researching who you're going to get that CCW from. That said, kind of leads to the next question. And as we move through what you and I have talked about is, there's some folks that are just happy checking the box, getting their gun and thinking that they got their magic shield. And, if somebody comes after me, I'm just going to whip my gun out and shoot them, right? Or scare them. And you mentioned real briefly, and we won't go into a lot of detail on this one, but, use of force isn't pulling the trigger, right? Right. So use of force can be just presenting that firearm.
It could be.
Still a high accountability for doing something like that. And you hear that talk right now, and it's actually scary because it's coming from some high profile people that can get a lot of people in trouble. Just point your gun at them, just shoot in the air, just shoot them in the leg. That's still deadly force, whether you take that life or not. So that's, we'll talk about that in much more depth at some other point, because we could talk about that for hours. But,
exactly.
So you do have these people that are willing to check off the box intentionally or unintentionally. They get the CCW and they know that that's the bare minimum. I liken it to people that I've trained that said, well, I took a self-defense class back in college and it was like 2 hours long and I'm good,
Yep.
And I can tell you what I liken that to. I was helping my kid with their math the other day, one of my children the other day, and I knew at some point in my life I had done that. I could not remember 1 ounce of it at all, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, taking a self-defense class, taking a CCW class, yes, it can get you through and give you some sort of confidence, right? But there's got to be more training after that.
Yeah.
There has to be. So do you offer advanced training, and kind of what would be the next level from CCW?
Yeah, I do. I have like a follow-on class. It's called an everyday carry class. So you know, it's a term people that carry a firearm every day for defense at EDC. So and that just it goes into, you know, because in the concealed carry class, we don't get into holsters and draw stroke and you know, movement and how to, you know, really assess a target and things like that. So we start getting into more of that stuff, right? Whereas the concealed carry class is more, you know, the real basics of how do you squeeze the trigger, get shots on target in an acceptable time, acceptable accuracy, and things like that. And then we start putting the reality to it, because the truth is like you were saying, we don't know what we don't know, right? And like, so when you said like, I wish I knew these things in the past, and I feel the same way. And that's why, like, I've kind of come full circle as far as like shooting, as far as teaching and instructing, and in a lot of areas of my life, actually, but come back full circle to like, what are the basics? Like, what do we need basically? Like, I think sometimes we try to make things complex to make it seem like we're doing something that other people can't do. Like, I'm an instructor, so I need to make these things and use complex words and theories and stuff to make it seem like I'm I'm this high level person. Whereas I think as an instructor, I almost want to get back to the basics and say, I know you're coming to this class and you want to hear all these crazy things and leave with this like amazing phrase that you've never heard before. But I want you to come to the class and be like, man, I didn't realize shooting was that easy. Right. Like I came thinking that I had to do this, this, and this, and you explained it and it was super simple. And I didn't realize that I could do it that easily. And so I'm trying to focus on the basic stuff. Like, if I only had 5 minutes with somebody, what would I tell them? Or if I had 2 hours of training with somebody, and that was it, because not a lot of people come back to advanced training, what would I teach them? And kind of look through those things that I messed up with as I was, you know, what type of holsters did I think were good, but I just didn't know because I didn't have the, you know, and different guns and stuff like that. So, so I'm trying to break it down, get back to like just basic, simple stuff that everybody can absorb, and you don't need to be a rocket scientist like I'm not, you know. So so I try to make it simple.
Right. And that's a good point, and that's something that I teach. So, you know, I've been involved in martial arts since a very, very, very young kid. My dad also served, and we were, you know, in the service over 20 years. And every country we went into, my dad would kind of put me into that area of, you know, you're going to go join that martial arts class. And I was always the American kid, you know, so I you know, wasn't always an advantage, let me tell you that. So, you know, but, you know, I started off, and, you know, I've done karate and Muay Thai and boxing and Taekwondo and, you know, some other defensive things. And there's a lot of very complicated stuff. And when you stand there and you see an 8th degree black belt, you're like, wow, I just wish I could get there. But what I teach is I've taken the basics from everything, because under a high stress situation, people only remember the basics. And that's kind of alluding to your point, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to remember a lot of complicated moves. You're going to go right back to the basics. And so, you know, I'll do, and my training is very similar to what you were talking about, is I'll just give them the basics to give them confidence. You know, I can do these things. I can do this thing over and over and over. Because that's what's going to happen in a high stressful situation. The chances of you remembering, you know, all the complicated things that you might be taught with your firearm or when you're physically getting involved with somebody, probably most of that is going to go out of the window, if not all of it.
Yeah.
You know? So I think keeping it basic is where it's at, you know, and that's a key point. But doesn't mean keeping it basic doesn't mean you can't improve. right?
Absolutely.
So, the scripture that I live by is Romans 12:18, where it says, whenever possible, live
Yep.
peaceably amongst all men
Mm-hmm.
to the best of your ability, right? So left alone without training, our ability is pretty bad. Somebody cuts us off in traffic. First thing we want to do is give them a hand signal and yell back at them, right? That's generally our natural response. Somebody threatens us, we go into what we call, the monkey dance. You puff your chest up, yeah, okay. Yeah. And I think that the only way you can get better is to raise your ability, and that to raise your ability is to train, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people the best self-defense you're ever going to use is the one you never have to use, right? And
Right.
I've had former students tell me, hey, I was at this place and this went down, and all I remembered was to de-escalate and go home. Because let's be honest, we don't know what's going to. You can be the best shooter, the best mixed martial artist in the world. It just takes one thing to go out of focus, and it all goes whack, and you may not go home at the end of the night. So, de-escalating and talking and not getting involved in those situations in the first place is where I spend a lot of time talking, and I know you do with yours too. So,
Yeah.
I think that in today's world, it's, I'm going to get mine is really a hard thing. I posted recently, meekness isn't weakness. You have to be confident that, you've done what you can and to the best of your ability to avoid that incident. But as we talk about, is there a time for violence? And we're going to talk about that in future episodes, to the best of your ability, whenever possible.
Right.
And sometimes it's just not possible for some folks,
Yeah. And I think to your point is that avoidance, right? Conflict avoidance, de-escalation, these things, we put them in a self-defense context a lot of times, but if you have control over your emotions, because that's really what it is, like during those times, like, oh, I want to hit this guy, or I want to, he's jawing at me and I know like I'm tougher than this guy, or I'm, your emotions, like, okay, do what you can do. Right. But like, if you can't control that, or if you start to be able to control that, I think that comes into your other aspects of your life, whether it's, with your boss, employees, or other employees that you might be in charge of, or customers that come in, or conflicts with your spouse or your kids. Like, I think it starts changing the way you live your life. And so that's why I think it's so important, because not only in self-defense, but like just the way we live our lives, that mental state of like, I'm going to avoid conflict. I'm going to de-escalate. I'm going to seek like peace whenever possible, whether it's somebody robbing me or with my spouse who we're not seeing eye to eye. I'm always seeking peace, in every situation. So.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And like, again, you could be the best trained person in whatever you choose to be trained in, but if you can't control that temper, you can't control that anger. You could have a bad day at work and you're driving home and somebody cuts you off again, before you know it, you're involved in something that you would never want it to be involved in. And of course, some of that comes with age too, right? I'm an old guy now. I wish I'd have known that many years ago. So, some of that wisdom comes with age, but I think, the training helps. And if I'm in a class, for example, you learn what it feels like to be punched. You learn what it feels like to be kicked. It's not pleasant, So if you learn those things in a controlled environment, and for you, if you ever talk about in your classes, what happens when you produce lethal force, we could look at videos and see things, and it's not pretty. It's not Hollywood. It's not glamorous. It's violent. It's ugly. It's nasty, and we should do all we can to avoid it in the first place. I think we let our egos get involved way too much in today's world. I recently was just reading some comments between some high-level martial artists and threatening each other online. And I'm thinking. In fact, I wrote and said, whatever happened to self-respect, respect, self-control, and patience, and all the things that you learn in traditional martial arts classes, they all went out the window, and it's just the ego gets involved. So you take your CCW, go to an advanced class, and I think the more you train, the more you realize I might get a skill set in using this, but I really don't want to use it, right?
Yeah.
So that's ultimately the goal. I don't want to use this unless I absolutely have to. And that's the same way that I train people. You know, we're going to be as violent as we can when we have to be, but I really don't want to be violent. I don't want to be anywhere near violence if I can be away from it. So I have another question for you. So what is your typical response, if you can think of it this way, for people who say, I think I'm good with just my CCW? I mean, is that a sort of a typical response that you hear in the firearms world?
It is across, like, it's not just in Ohio, it's across the whole country that, you know, that there's this disconnect between reality and I don't know if it's a Dunning-Kruger effect where like people get just enough skill level where they think that they're good enough, right? And then they overestimate their skill set.
Yeah.
And I see it a lot, like even some people that have taken classes afterwards, they don't want to ever shoot on a timer, or they don't want to shoot not like competitively, but like against somebody else where you're being compared. It's like, oh, I don't need to compare myself. There's not going to be a shot timer in a real fight. Well, there isn't a shot timer, but there certainly is a time limit if you're being attacked, right? So I don't know what that time is going to be. It could be a second, it could be a minute. I don't know. But but there's this idea that like, I'll just perform well when the time comes. Like I have the basics. So whenever it happens, my body will just somehow know how to react like people that train nonstop. And it doesn't happen. Right. So, so what I tell people is, you know, I understand that, you know, that you've gone through the concealed carry class and this is just the basics. This is absolutely like you're still drinking milk, right? Like you're a baby drinking formula milk, right? There's so much that you don't even know about that if you come to a class, and that's why, you know, I make the everyday carry class enough. It's challenging enough where they leave saying, man, I thought I knew stuff then, and I went through this class and I thought this was going to be the end all, and then I'd just be good. Right. And now I'm realizing, wait, we didn't even talk about like, how do I defend myself in a vehicle or around a vehicle or inside my home? Like what if I have my kids with me, or I'm holding somebody, or what if, you know, like you start expanding these concepts and, you know, think about where you go every day. Right. If you come to the range and you're wearing range tactical, you know, tuxedo at the range, but you never wear that and you go to yoga studios all day. Yeah. Right. Like you start, I have them put themselves in the reality of their everyday life and say, where do you go? What do you do? And if this were to happen, how do you have your firearm? Are you carrying it? Are you able to do this X, Y, Z? And so I kind of like expose that to them and then let them kind of reflect on that and say, yeah, maybe I should. And some do, and some still say, you know, it's not important to me. And, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think, you know, it's kind of bringing everything back before we finish. It's, you know, we've talked about, you and I have talked about, is there, again, you have the folks that train in unarmed or fitness, and you have the folks that train to a degree in, you know, firearms training, and never should the two ever come together. And there isn't a lot out there where they do. Right. But if you look at the real world situation, you know, somebody's not generally going to announce when they're about to hit you, right? Right. So you're not going to have time to get into that perfect stance to present your firearm, get in that perfect stance to be able to throw palm strikes or elbow strikes. So, you know, that's why I like to pressure test a lot of things, right? And it sounds like, you know, your advanced classes where you start to pressure test things a little bit to see if you're as good as you think you are. And, you know, as many years I've been doing this, I'm still learning every time I do something.
Me too.
I also know I'm nowhere near as good as I once thought I was, right?
Right.
And I think that can be a very dangerous area to get into when you start thinking you don't need to learn anymore, or you already got it all figured out, or you don't need one or the other. Because, you know, I could be, again, the great UFC fighter, and if somebody pulls out a gun in front of me and they're a few feet away, what do I do in that situation?
And that's
Or
for
you're
instructors as well,
right.
right? Like not just like the average person, but like who's seeking instruction, but instructors as well, to like, they can fall victim of that. Like, hey, I'm good enough. I'm an instructor. I don't need to go train with this guy or think about that.
Right, absolutely. And so, I think we all can gain by continuing on training, or at least keep doing what you're doing. Again, if I'd have kept learning my math from the day I left school till last night, I would have been able to, answer those questions for them really quickly, but I don't remember any of it. It looks like foreign language to me. So
Right.
same thing with this, our skill sets that we work in, if somebody's coming at you and they're coming at you fast, and maybe they're just asking you for $1, and does that but the guy looks shady and scary, does that mean you can pull out your firearm and present it to him? Does that mean you've got time to, if he goes from scary to he's absolutely coming to attack me? I think a lot of people will realize if they pressure test that there's definitely a need for some additional training or some additional advice, or to work on some things differently or think differently about it. Having great unarmed skills is awesome, but it's not the total package. Having great armed skills is awesome. It's not the total package either. In today's world, the hostility towards the Second Amendment, everybody's recording you, and you make one slip up, then your whole world has changed. And same with unarmed. Today's world, you can throw a nice palm strike and land them clearly, and they can hit the ground, and you're going to be responsible for that. So those are things we're going to talk about in the future, just some things to think about. But I appreciate you coming on and your expertise in this realm, and as we go forward with other episodes, we'll talk in more detail about when to present a firearm, perhaps the legal ramifications, what kind of firearm to get. That's probably the next step for somebody who might be listening and saying, what, yeah, I've been in martial arts for a while, but now I think I want to move to a different area, or work on something different, and work on firearm skills and training, pistol, revolvers, semi-automatic, all this stuff that can be intimidating to people. That that's where you can give your advice, as you work through those things. So we'll do some real live pressure testing, right? We worked on some not long ago, and I think it's important to do that stuff, and give people an idea that they don't necessarily need a huge gym, right? I've gone from a huge gym to where I'm just training people in a garage gym. It's a gym, fully functional gym, but it's a fully functional garage as well, and enjoying it. And I think in your realm, you want people to come to the range as much as possible, but with ammo being hard to get a hold of and the prices on it, you can also teach them skill sets they can go home with to work on and practice maybe drawing a firearm, and then combine the two. What do you do if somebody does start throwing punches? Does that give you the right to pull that firearm? And so I'm looking forward to it, as well as we're going to have people, like I said, come in that are going to share their story about how, their life preservation stories is how I liken it to, they just pulled themselves through something and it made them so much better in the end. So, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have people that have dealt with cancer and addictions and all that, those other things in the future, as well as your training and my training. So I appreciate it. That's a wrap on season 1, episode 1, right? You're in 500. So you're way up there.
We'll get it there. You'll get there. Cause this is awesome. I appreciate like your outlook on this, and, you're my brother, man. And like, I appreciate your perspective and your demeanor and everything. And I think the focus of the podcast and the direction, the way it's, your feet are pointed is right where it should be. And I think it's going to be great. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to more. So you're going to have to help me with the IT section, right? We want to make sure people can get a hold of you if they're looking for more information on, CCW classes or advanced classes, or, how they can hear you on concealedcarry.com, because that's a phenomenal podcast. You guys cover everything, like you said, from, the legal things to everyday, actions that we see in the news. It's an amazing podcast. I think you got like 250,000 viewers or something I saw at one point. So you guys are doing great. Episode 1 for me. So I'm looking high up to you guys.
Yeah,
but
right on.
I appreciate it. And
Thank you,
we'll
brother.
make sure people can reach out to you and reach you for your classes if
Thank
they're
you.
interested. So
Thank you.
all right, brother. Well, have a good one. I appreciate it. Thanks
You
everybody
too.
for listening. And we look forward to episode 2 coming up soon.